Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're really looking at three important stories. The first is with reference to the important visit of the Uzbek president who had come to Pakistan on a two-day visit. He met with the top delegation, including the Prime Minister, and he also came with high-level ministers from his own country as well. And we saw that a lot of views were exchanged between the two countries, including the Prime Minister's statement with reference to Afghanistan on how Uzbekistan and Pakistan will be cooperating with reference to putting forward Afghanistan's case in the international community and advocating not only for the humanitarian crisis, but also meeting with the Afghans with regards to how and what conditions can really be met in terms of international recognition. Other views were also exchanged in terms of trade relations, enhancing trade and bilateral ties within both the countries, including media and tourism linkages. He also talked about how both countries also share similar views on Islamophobia, and with that regard, how both countries can also collaborate in the future. A lot of these issues, of course, were discussed in the meeting. We're going to see how this relationship is going to be explored in the coming days, and then what exactly do we mean when we talk about these different areas of cooperation in terms of actual tangible steps. The second segment, we will be taking a look at Pakistan Navy tracking down an Indian submarine and foiling its attempt to enter the waters of the country on the 1st of March. This is the fourth such incident that has happened in the last 5 years, and of course points towards the resolve and the commitment and the competence of Pakistan Navy and how it has always thwarted such Indian designs. We are going to be talking in further detail as to really what happened and how this was thwarted, and then again how to take a look at this on a much larger scale as well, because this of course is not the first time that this has happened. And lastly, we will also be taking a look at the Kulbhushan case. As discussed earlier in one of our shows as well, we were talking about how India seems to have forgotten or is ignoring its citizen. And now again, more time has been extended to India. April 13th has been given by the Islamabad High Court for India to be able to get counsel for Kulbhushan in this case. Whether or not India actually comes up this time around and what is going to be the future of this case and what really is India playing at, we'll explore further in today's show. All of these three segments, we have been joined in our studios, of course, by Raja Faisal, and today we have a very special guest as well in the studio. We have been joined by Mr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, who is a foreign affairs expert, and he's taken the time out to join us in the studios. Thank you very much, Mr. Jaspal. Of course, we've also been joined by our guests online, and for our first segment, I'll be announcing the guests as soon as they've joined us, but let me just to tell you who have joined us. They've joined us online, as you can see on your screens. John Sifton, who's the Asia Advocacy Director. Thank you very much, John, for being with us. And we've also been joined by Khalid Taimur Akram, who is the Executive Director, Center for Global and Strategic Studies. Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid, for being with us in the show today. I'll start with you, Mr. Jaspal. When we look at, of course, the kind of relationship that Pakistan has had with Uzbekistan and the kind of potential that both the relationship actually carries, what main ideas do you think, or the main aspects that there are in terms of where Pakistan and Uzbekistan can further explore? Of course, we know there's trade and there's the issue of Islamophobia and there's Afghanistan. When we explore all of these in further detail as well, but given the evolving scenario right now, which one of these do you think holds most importance?
I think that with this president of Uzbekistan's visit, it's a great achievement, and if you see that the work was going on, and the good luck for Pakistan was that the previous ambassador Furqat, who was here, and now he is the deputy foreign minister there. So by his combination, and these things works. But as we have seen, the most important thing which we are expecting, that is a connectivity in the shape of railway track, one of the shortest railway track from Central Asia or landlocked Central Asia. You can say heading from coming from Uzbekistan, going to through the Afghanistan, entering Pakistan, and 3 ports will be available. That will be a big achievement. Second is, as you rightly pointed out, Islamophobia, which is Prime Minister Imran Khan's one of the important agenda, and Uzbeks are also experiencing these kind of things. As you have heard, this Uzbek Tariq-e-Islami, something like that. So Islamic movement, and that will be a good thing. And then if we can counter this, then we are able to not only establish peace in our country, but also in Afghanistan and in the Central Asia. That is a very important point. And this is a convergence. And if you see that Uzbekistan is an important member of this ECO, it's also a member of the SCO, it's also a member of the OIC, and then it's a very important member of CIS within the Russian's connection. So by this way, I think that President of Uzbekistan's visit to Pakistan will be very beneficial for our geopolitical, geoeconomic, you can say, pursuits in this region. And finally, with this connectivity, of course, CPEC, which is our main thing. And there is also Central Asian corridor. So if we and Uzbekistan able to establish these kind of the connection, then we will be connecting these corridors through Uzbekistan and Pakistan tracks. That will be further strengthening. I think these are the things which we can see.
All right, let me also bring in the discussion, Mr. Khalid, with reference to what the Prime Minister has spoken about on how Uzbekistan and Pakistan will be able to cooperate with each other in terms of Afghanistan's issue. The important aspects that have been highlighted, of course, include the unfreezing of assets and then also talking to the Afghans in terms of the conditions required by the international community, both really big question marks for Afghanistan's progress. What sort of collaboration or cooperation can Uzbekistan and Pakistan enter into with reference to both of these issues? And what sort of an impact will this collaboration even have on the outcome?
Yes, thank you very much. Let me tell you one thing, that Pakistan and Uzbekistan both share very large borders with Afghanistan, and there is a large population of Uzbek ethnic Afghans living in Afghanistan. Therefore, in the border areas of Afghanistan, which are with Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan enjoys a lot of support over there, and Uzbekistan has been providing free electricity and free amenities to the border areas of Afghanistan. So Prime Minister Imran Khan's initiative that Pakistan and Uzbekistan should jointly work for bringing stability in Afghanistan can work, because the Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev has already had started the Afghan peace process in 2018, once he started collaborating and he started talking to different ethnic groups in Afghanistan. So right now Uzbekistan has been playing a humanitarian role in Afghanistan, and I feel that in coming days, if Pakistan and Uzbekistan, they join hand together, they can bring it can bring peace in Afghanistan. And also I would like to mention over here that on the initiative of the Uzbek president in April 2020, Pakistan, Afghanistan and Uzbekistan had jointly signed an agreement for laying the railway line between Tashkent, Mazar-e-Sharif and Peshawar. I'm here right now. I'm here in Tashkent since last 2-3 days, and I can tell you that in last 3-4 days I've been interacting with various think tanks over here and with their media people. The government of Uzbekistan as well as the media in Uzbekistan has given a lot of importance to this visit, and they say that this is the dawn of a new era.
All right. John, I'd like to pose a similar question to you. When we talk about collaboration in terms of taking forward the case of Afghanistan, both in terms of the international community and the Taliban regime, it seems that perhaps both really have not budged from where they stood a couple of months ago, and it seems that this is questionable whether or not any sort of success can be achieved in terms of the kind of things that the Taliban regime had committed to, and whether or not they're even going to be capable enough to do that very soon. Is that something that you think can change once countries such as Uzbekistan and Pakistan come into play, who of course have had a different association with Afghanistan and Taliban regime? Will their voice be heard differently? And if yes, then what about the international community when we talk about unfreezing of assets? Are they going to change their minds about that?
The Taliban have to come to terms with the economic realities that exist now, because the United States, the World Bank, and other international donors have not so much frozen the assets, which is a problem, but unbanked the central bank of Afghanistan. Right now, the central bank of Afghanistan cannot conduct business on the international financial system. As a result, places like Uzbekistan, Pakistan have exports to Afghanistan who need to be paid in dollars, whether it's exporting electricity or exporting cooking oil and rice or anything. There are businesses in Pakistan, businesses in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan that need to be paid in dollars. And the importers of Afghanistan need to be able to pay them in dollars using the electronic banking system. But if the Central Bank of Afghanistan isn't given credentials for the SWIFT system, for the international banking system, with the World Bank, if it isn't able to use assets on deposit, assets that it has in foreign currency reserves, none of that's going to happen. And the business community, not so much the governments, but the business communities of Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, and Iran can communicate this to their Taliban business partners, and they in turn can communicate this to the Taliban, that this needs to be unstuck. The economy of Afghanistan cannot remain strangled and dead in the gutter. It needs to function, or else there will be a famine.
John, there's another question from you. Earlier, as Dr. Jaspal has rightly pointed out, that of course Uzbekistan has concerns over Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, IMU. But if we look at current Afghanistan situation, of course we know that ISIS Khorasan is working there full-fledged. As we have Uzbekistan come into Pakistan and making serious efforts to counter the terrorism, we aren't seeing the Western countries obviously come into Pakistan and trying to help out Afghanistan get out of the mess of the terrorism right now. Because if we look at ISIS Khorasan, it's considered as a backyard of Daesh, and of course it poses a threat to the Western world as well. Don't you think that efforts should be made by the Western countries as well, similar efforts which are being made by Uzbekistan and neighboring countries of Afghanistan?
Well, again, it's in nobody's interest to have an unstable, dangerous backyard in which anything can happen and any plots can be plotted because there's no law, there's no order, and there's chaos. And so I would think that the governments of bordering countries, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, could make common cause with Western countries about the need to stabilize the economic situation in Afghanistan. Because we can talk about fighting terrorism, counterterrorism operations, and all of that, cooperation, fine. But really, if you ultimately want to lower the risk of international terrorist organizations or insurgent groups from other countries using Afghanistan as their backyard, then you want a stable Afghanistan. The Taliban is a loathsome, rights-abusing government, which is antithetical and misogynistic to women's rights, but it is the government, and they need to be dealt with as a government. They are a de facto government of this country, whether we like it or not, and they have to be dealt with.
Right, and that perhaps doesn't seem to be the case
collapse.
when we see the way that, of course, a lot of the countries are interacting with the Taliban regime at the moment, because, of course, they're not officially recognized, and that of course, puts into question a lot of the other measures that have been taken. Mr. Jaspal, can we say that that's something that shouldn't really put any difference in the way that what is going on, because the reality is they're the ones who are in power at the moment. They're the ones who are responsible for the citizens of Afghan. Does that in any way affect the way that we are dealing with them?
I think that today Prime Minister of Pakistan and the President of Uzbekistan both had agreed on one point, that how to defreeze the funds for the Afghan government. And Prime Minister very rightly pointed out, and I think that the President of Uzbekistan also concurred this view, that Taliban are there, the regime is there, and why you are freezing it? They are responsible to provide the basic human facilities to them, and Pakistan, along the other countries, they have been debating, if you recall the Foreign Minister special meeting in Islamabad of the OIC. At that time we identified, and since now August, August, it's almost, I think that 5 to 6 months have been lapsed, and Taliban have maintained their control in Kabul. Whether we like them or not, this is a different debate, but we have to now admit it, that what is the normal procedure, de facto and de jure. From de facto, you transit to de jure after 3 months when you have a control over the capital of the city, and secondly, there is no challenger to them. And if there is no challenger, then how you can say that we can freeze their assets? It's just very strange. On the one side, you are saying that because Americans failed in the last 20 years to establish or you can say institute their system there, but now they are trying to punish the Taliban, but indirectly they are punishing the entire region. And that's why I think that the President of Pakistan and Prime Minister of Pakistan and President of Uzbekistan, they had this identical or common or convergence of opinion that we have to build the Afghanistan if we have to get rid of the terrorism in this region. Today, we had a tragic incident in Peshawar, and if we go to connect them, definitely we are connecting this to the this Khorasan, as Raja Bhai rightly pointed out earlier, that this is the point that we have to work together in order to control, and without stabilizing the Afghanistan, this entire region will be suffering, whether Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Pakistan. We need this stability in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. And it's very important to the region, of course. Mr. Khalid, when we talk about Uzbek and Pakistan relations, the economic aspect, of course, is very significant. And we've seen that it has not only increased, but it also still has a lot of potential for us to grow. Can you identify for us the different areas in which joint ventures can even be increased between Uzbekistan and Pakistan, with particular reference to cooperation in perhaps energy or connectivity?
Yes, in last couple of years, the trade has almost increased to 50%. And ever since the WTO sanctions are lifted from the Uzbek cotton in October 2018, there's a lot of Pakistani textile industry which is moving into Uzbekistan. And Uzbeks are learning this textile industry from Pakistan. There's a football factory from Sialkot, which is now established in the outskirts of Tashkent. Surgical items and the sports goods are already being brought in, and there's a large market for pharmaceutical items, Pakistani pharmaceutical items in Uzbekistan. Pakistani vegetables are also coming to Uzbekistan. So there is a lot of potential because these countries are landlocked, and they are mostly dependent for their textile and other things on Russia. But Pakistan is very nearby, and this trade and opening of this trade corridor via Afghanistan can help bringing Pakistani business to Uzbekistan.
All right. John, of course, another area that was highlighted earlier as well is Islamophobia. And Prime Minister Imran Khan has reiterated this on various platforms before as well. And the sentiments have been echoed by countries like Russia in the past as well. And Uzbekistan also shares similar views. And of course, this is an issue close to heart to a lot of the Muslim nations. When we talk about these countries and the issue of Islamophobia on a global scale, how do we see that this campaign or this objective can be collaborated on and also advocated in front of the international community? What sort of ways can we see this happening?
Well, it's a difficult question, but I think one thing to highlight is that when international mechanisms meet, like today, the Human Rights Council met in Geneva to debate Ukraine, and the other day, the General Assembly met in New York and debated Ukraine, and resolutions were passed by vast margins condemning Ukraine. But countries like Pakistan and Uzbekistan abstained or didn't vote in these. And this is an area where if you want to stand up for something like Islamophobia or the rights of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, the countries have to speak with one voice. Whether it's about Ukraine or about the Rohingya or any issue, you have to take part in the international plane. And so if you're going to convince the West to unfreeze assets and give money to Afghanistan, if you're going to condemn the Rohingya genocide, if you're going to do anything, you have to join in the international community and take part. And one of the faults I think that Pakistan and Uzbekistan and several other countries in the region are having is that they're not taking part in the international mechanisms, in the United Nations systems like the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly.
All
Because
right, all right. Faisal, can you actually help me understand whether or not this is correct in terms of what Pakistan has put forward? I understand we've always talked about human rights violations wherever they are found, whether it's in India or in other parts of the world, and we've supported and talked about human rights protections and a lot of the things that are, of course, in violation of international norms. Is that not the case?
It is, of course, and but there are double standards. I just want to highlight whenever it comes to Pakistan highlighting something, or Muslim countries, they highlight in something related to the human rights. Of course, it is not being seen as it should be. And if we talk about India, of course, why double standards? Because it is being considered as a huge market, and they have obviously their economic endeavors to fulfill, and they can't be fulfilled unless they are sitting with the Indians, because they consider them a huge market. And this is the only reason they are doing it for. But I think this is the right time that even the Western world, they need to shun their practices of double standards, only for the reasons that having economic endeavors, this should not be stopping them to call spade a spade.
So just for the record, Pakistan has utilized all forums to highlight human rights violations anywhere in the world and has spoken openly about all of these issues, of course. And Islamophobia is an important matter, which is, of course, of a grave concern to Muslim states as well. And this is something that is perhaps on a much larger scale than just human rights violations. It is something that is more of a way that it's looked at, and a kind of ideology that needs to be tackled with. And it represents a much more subtler but a much more significant issue as well that is even harder to deal with. Mr. Khalid, when we talk about Uzbekistan's stance on this, of course we know it's similar. But again, as we talked about earlier, a lot of it is not represented or understood the way it needs to be. For example, the kind of issues we were talking about earlier in terms of the terrorist threats and activities, they're perceived in a certain way by a certain faith, which of course is not the case. That, of course, is an issue that really needs to be dealt with. Can Uzbekistan cooperate with Pakistan in this matter?
And if we can add another question with it, if we talk about the Afghanistan, of course, in recent past, terrorism persisted only because of one reason, that there were economic vulnerabilities of Afghan people. If we have better connectivity, of course it is going to change the Afghan people as well. Why? Because there will be economic opportunities created within Afghanistan. Should we say it that it will actually help having better connectivity from Pakistan to the Central Asian republics and reaching out to Russia?
Yes, let me answer it in two parts. Number one, actually just today I attended a very big meeting over here, which was the Joint Action Plan on Counter-Terrorism, which was organized by United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism. The 5 Central Asian states have devised a single counter-terrorism strategy, which is overseen by United Nations Office of the Counter-Terrorism. So one, not only Uzbekistan but complete Central Asia is very much serious about it. Today they talked about not only the de-radicalization, Islamophobia, but they agreed on an agenda which included that all those people who are running away from Afghanistan, they should be returned to their countries. And they have also agreed on one more thing, that they will keep on talking to various factions in Afghanistan. And also, yes, ISIS or IMU, or these are bigger threats over here. But one thing is very heartening to see that in the Joint Action Plan of the Central Asia, which the meeting just concluded today, they have included Pakistan in it. Because they see that Pakistan has done a lot in countering the terrorism. So a big delegation from Pakistan was here, and we shared our perspective on countering the terrorism, and which was well taken by the Central Asian countries. Now coming over to the connectivity part of it, as we know that Afghanistan is a bridge between South Asia and Central Asia, and as per the latest UN figures, even due to the sanctions and their banks being blocked, they earned money on the transit trade. So the transit trade is one of the key and can be one of the key factors which can change in times to come the Afghan livelihood, because all the trade coming from the 5 landlocked countries has to pass through Afghanistan to come to Pakistan and then go to the Gwadar port. So I think we should be projecting this thing, and we should be helping
all right, Mr. Khalid, we're almost out of time. And Mr. Sir, I'll just come back to you as well. We just have to say goodbye to our guests. So let me just quickly ask John our last question on this segment. With reference to the kind of relations the two countries need to develop to, of course, enhance their bilateral relationship. We talk about political and economic aspects, of course, but the cultural aspects, perhaps, or the people-to-people aspects are often ignored, and they shouldn't be. We know that there's also been talk about how Pakistan will be making a film on Zahiruddin Babur, who's the first Mughal emperor hailing from Uzbekistan, and a lot of other areas where we can collaborate in terms of tourism and cultural exchanges as well. How significant do you think this partnership is to an overall bilateral relationship between two countries?
Well, one of the most important aspects of the relationship is the fact that there's a shared interest in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is a thorn in everybody's side. It is a enduring tragedy for the entire world. And this is an area where both Uzbekistan and Pakistan can work together to present options and solutions to the rest of the world, which so much has a responsibility now to deal with Afghanistan. So I'm sorry to focus on Afghanistan so much, but I feel as though it's actually not just geographically between the two countries, but is in some ways politically, geopolitically, the centerpiece of their relationship as well, not just as a transit, but as something they can work together on and present a unified face to the United States and to the West about what the solutions are to make this country stable and at peace, which is beneficial to the whole world, not just to Uzbekistan and Pakistan.
Understandably so, of course. John Sifton, Khalid Taimur, thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the debate. Mr. Jaspal, I understand you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add on this point that what Faisal has rightly pointed out, because theoretically we all speak that how we can manage the terrorism or terrorists, but practically connectivity will be the only answer. If you can change Afghanistan's culture by connecting it with Central Asia and South Asia, because if you see Afghanistan remained a buffer during the great powers game since 2 centuries, and then the now again third great game is going on. So what I think the Faisal was pointing out, that was very rightly, that this connectivity bring a new kind of a information going from one side to the other, economic activity and lifestyle will be changing, and for that of course there is a need to defreeze. And Johnson was talking about Ukrainian or you can say Myanmar. Yes, we support the human rights there, but what's about the Indian occupied, illegally occupied Kashmir human rights? And above all, why international community is not defreezing the Afghan assets? What is the human rights violation within Afghanistan because of this entire international community is part of it? That was my point I wanted to add it.
Absolutely, and it's an important one because there are people there who are suffering as of now and as we speak, and this is something that's quite urgent, and perhaps the actions that have been taken by the international community, unfortunately, are just not good enough to cater to the needs of the people in Afghanistan. Our second segment is going to be with reference to Pakistan Navy's efforts. We know that Pakistan Navy is, of course, has its resolve, its commitment towards protecting the motherland, and it's always been there, and we've seen that in the kind of actions that have been taken. We know that in the past 5 years, 4 attempts have been made by Indian submarines to establish their presence within waters that are out of their reach, and then of course we understand as well that they have been thwarted every time. Once again, an Indian submarine has been thwarted by the Pakistan Navy, but the larger question again, because we understand what we're capable of, and it's quite obvious to everyone else as well, but the larger question is that why is this happening again and again, and how do we cater to that? Because no matter what violation India does, whether it's crossing waters or whether it's human rights violations or whether it's their actions in Kashmir, they meet with no consequence. That is a bigger question that we also need to answer. Let me also welcome in our show Commodore retired Babar Bilal Haider, who's the Director, Indian Ocean Studies Center. He has joined us online. Thank you very much, Mr. Babar, for being with us in the debate. Before we talk about the larger question that I was earlier mentioning, I want to also understand exactly what really happened and the kind of maneuvers and intelligence or competence that is required by the Pakistan Navy in terms of thwarting these designs. Of course, we understand it's not the first time this has happened.
Thank you very much for controlling me. And um, this is not the first time that the Indian Navy or the Indian submarine force has trying to penetrate Pakistani waters. I think this is fourth occasion that they have tried to penetrate, and they have been caught red-handed. Primarily, these submarines, they are used for multi-purpose. One is for the clandestine operations. Secondly, is the acquiring of intelligence. Sometimes they use this for dropping and picking up their operators. Sometimes they are here to monitor our activities. Sometimes they want to check Pakistan Navy resolve and alertness level. Sometimes they want to just show their power that we can penetrate. But every time and each occasion they were caught. And I probably assume that there are two basic reasons. One, maybe their professional standard is not up to that mark to operate those submarines, although they are very new. Two of them were commissioned last year, so they lack their professionalism that they are caught, or they are having some problem with their submarines also. They cannot stay underwater, and there is some technical issues with those submarines. So there are multiple reasons, but we presume that they were trying to test our alertness level, and mashallah, Pakistan Navy has done a wonderful job, and they have been able to catch them red-handed, and they picked up right away from our shores. So it was a very good achievement which Pakistan Navy has done.
Commodore Babar, I just wanted to ask how embarrassing it should be for a captain who's actually, leading this submarine, number one. Number two, a serious note, could we say that all of these activities, discrete activities from Indian Navy are just obviously because they want to spy on the coastal side of Pakistan, because they know that they are facing two fronts from China and Pakistan at the same time, and they might be looking for something related to China out there as well?
I little bit disagree with this connotation that a two-front situation. Pakistan and China are two peaceful, friendly nations, and our focus is on economy. Although the Indians may be interested in what is happening on Pakistani coast, that cannot be ruled out. But about coming back to your first question, that is about the captain of a submarine. Basically, in our naval services all over the globe, if your submarine is caught on surface or during the war patrol by the enemy, that means you are dead. During wartime, we will not spare such activities. This is our peaceful nature, that in the peace we do not want to raise the level that we are letting them go. But as far as that captain is concerned, probably he must be in a very thick soup now.
Yes, but considering Faisal, what we have seen India act in the past, perhaps they're also awarding him with some medal or the other, which is what they've done in the past as well. But anyway, let's talk more about exactly how, when we talk about such exercises, of course, and the kind of resolve and commitment that our Navy has. Of course, we understand there are exercises going on as we speak as well, and then we know that perhaps this sort of threat was already being prepared for as well. When we talk about the way that such attempts are actually detected and then taken care of, what sort of measures are actually involved in this detection? How do you actually go about it? What kind of surveillance is actually existing on our maritime borders to protect Pakistan from such attempts?
Although this is something technical arrangements we do, but we usually have layered defense system. There are some aircraft in the air, there is surface ships, and there are submarines which patrol the underwater also. So all the levels, underwater, surface, and air, is guarded to the maximum limits which we can do it. In addition to that, it is the human resolve. That is, machinery is doing its job. But staying at sea with that resolve that we will not allow anybody to come into our area without our permission. That is the depiction of Pakistan Navy's officers and sailors they have done in this case also. So it is not only the machinery, but it's the man and machinery both working together to get such fine results.
Absolutely.
Quickly,
Quick
I just
question,
wanted,
Faisal.
yeah, I just wanted to ask Sir Jaspal the same question, the similar question which I asked.
Let me just also just please say thank you to Commodore Babar Bilal, who's joined us online. Thank you very much for taking the time out, and then we can continue our discussion with Jaspal as well.
Thank you, Sana. Sir Jaspal, I just wanted to ask you about the same question. Should we be aware that India is obviously having, you know, a two-front with China and with Pakistan at the same time, and if there is in Indo-Pacific an activity going on, especially on our you know, coastal side, should we consider that it is owing to the fact that, of course, Pakistan and China, they are cooperating each other?
In my opinion, I fully agree with you, because if you see, it's the first time. Earlier, India used to say, I have a two-front conflict or a threat. It was more theoretical, but now it's real practical. We have to not ignore this. And it's a good advantage for us. If India is now engaged with the China, where earlier they were talking of billions trade, but now the both states are fighting at the Gulwan, they have a problem there. And then India is an active member of Quad. So in that context, we cannot ignore, or neither Chinese can afford to ignore. But on the other side, India is trying to ingress in our water. There is something different. They wanted to prove to the Americans that we have too much ingress and we are able to target this Gwadar or these kind of things. And frankly speaking, let's say, think for a hypothetically, if Indian was able to, or Indian submarine was able to intervene and undetected, maybe they create some kind of a mischief there, because Indians are not going to lose any option of a military adventurism, which is whichever they get an opportunity. If you see that they hit our Navy aircraft, which was only on our side of the border, and they are going to play a dirty game in this context. So that's why Pakistan Navy cannot ignore. If we simply say that, oh, theoretically speaking, they are there for the sake of intelligence gathering, no, they are there for misadventure.
Absolutely.
And we have to not underestimate their designs and see wherever the Indian had get a chance, they did it. So
but again, just pass up the larger question of why this keeps on happening without consequences still there. Again, it's a violation of law, but nothing really happens.
I think that Pakistan is not interested to escalate the threat or the situation. We are acting more cautiously. And if you see during the 2019, during the Pulwama military standoff, at that time we identified and we only alarmed them and let them go. But even again we identified, I think that Indians will stop this aggression or this kind of activities when once we identify it and we hit and destroy their submarine. They are, in fact, they want to drag us in a conflict in this Arabian Sea, and Pakistan is acting more rationally as well as a peace-loving state. So that's why we identified. But you have to only stop Indians once you have destroyed their submarine.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Jaspal, for being with us in the show. Understand it's 7:45 and you have to leave, so leaving you right on time. Let me also welcome in the show Nimra Arshad, who is a legal expert who's joined us for our third segment. Welcome, Nimra, to the debate. We're going to be now talking about the Kulbhushan Yadav case, which of course is extremely important for Pakistan, but somehow the same kind of importance is not being shared by India. We have earlier discussed this as well, that perhaps India is not interested or has forgotten Kulbhushan Yadav case. What really do you think, in terms of what Indian actions have been in the past and perhaps in the future as well, really point towards? Are they avoiding this, or do you want this case to be taken to ICJ? What is really in the works?
Thank you, Sana, for having me on the show. I think with regards to Indian strategy at the Islamabad High Court, which the court has also noted in multiple orders that they've seemed unwilling to engage in these proceedings. I think the court is also cognizant of the fact, and I think from what we've also seen happening in the proceedings, I feel like with India not coming in and not filing a petition or not representing Kulbhushan Commander Jadhav at the High Court, perhaps this is a strategy that they're taking to essentially go to the International Court of Justice and contend there that Pakistan failed to comply with the International Court's judgment when the court held that Pakistan needed to provide Commander Jadhav a right to review and reconsideration, an effective review and reconsideration, and what that entails. Essentially,
in that case, wouldn't it be obvious that Pakistan has time and again called out India to provide counsel, has asked repeatedly, has provided deadlines, the courts are taking a look into the matter? Will that not be considered?
Absolutely, absolutely, it will be, and I think this is why the Islamabad High Court is very cognizant of this fact, and this is why they've publicly once again this put out on record, put recorded in the order that was passed yesterday by the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court, that he feels that for Pakistan to be able to comply with the judgment in its full letter and spirit, it's important that the government of India becomes a party to these proceedings, because I feel like the Islamabad High Court is also very cognizant that if these proceedings are to move forward with a government appointed lawyer for Commander Jadhav, and if then India decides to take this matter again to the ICJ, we will at least Pakistan, the government of Pakistan's efforts to engage the government of India and the judiciary's efforts to invite government of India to take part in these proceedings will well be on record, and then
Right.
can be
So
used
Nimra,
as evidence
just a
before
clarification, Faisal. So Nimra, do you think that at the end of the day, the objective that you were earlier saying that perhaps what India wants to do is take it to the ICJ is in fact redundant, right? Because that's not going to really be beneficial to them. Because then Pakistan's efforts will be put into place, and then they're not going to get what they want, right?
Absolutely, I agree, but perhaps it's a question of optics at this point, and it's a question of delaying these proceedings, because these proceedings were instituted by the government of Pakistan back in August 2020, and a year and a half has already lapsed, and we're still in the early stages of this review process. The court is still trying to get government of India to engage representation for Commander Jadhav. So perhaps it's a delaying tactic, and perhaps it's also a tactic that sort of talk essentially for to sort of represent Pakistan in a negative manner, or to sort of play out the optics. So I feel like it's a more strategic exercise that the government of India is playing right now. Also, if we look at the order that was passed yesterday by the Islamabad High Court, reference has been made to a diplomatic note that was submitted, that was sent by the government of India, and then the corresponding reply that the government of Pakistan gave to that note, and the contents of those note are obviously not recorded in that order, perhaps because it's confidential. But from what was written in that order, perhaps government of India has perhaps expressed reservations regarding the review process. But to that, the High Court has also responded that they feel that the legislation that was enacted by Pakistan in light of the judgment adequately caters and allows Pakistan to comply with the judgment. So all in all, it does feel like the government of India is delaying is trying to delay these proceedings, and perhaps will not become a party to these proceedings, to sort of take it to the ICJ and then bring back this matter
All right.
on the international stage again.
Nimra, I just wanted to ask, as Pakistan's judicial system is following the course of the justice as advised by ICJ, and ICJ is obviously expressing its confidence on Pakistan's judicial system, but at the same time India is not expressing its confidence on Pakistan's judicial system. Should we care about it?
We should care about it to the extent, if you look at what the Islamabad High Court observed yesterday, is we should care about it to the extent that our proceedings need to conform to procedures, need to conform to principles of fair trial, and need to conform to principles of due process. And that's what the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court also noted yesterday, that this proceedings should proceed in a manner where justice is not only done but seen to be done. So what he's trying to do is to try and engage government of India to ensure that an effective and meaningful review process takes place. However, I feel after this opportunity, and this case is now fixed for next month, if government of India does not become party to these proceedings, or does not file a petition, or does not appoint a legal representative for Commander Jadhav, the court will proceed, and we will have enough evidence on record through public proceedings.
All right, Faisal, do you think it could also be that we know that India, of course, is trying to avoid the situation for so many reasons, but there could be another reason in terms of the fact that, of course, this points towards evidence that India has always been, and still has continued to be involved in state-sponsored terrorism within Pakistan. And of course, this entire question questions India's role for terrorist activities that it, of course, denies. But this case is case in point, where it shows and it has evidence that this is, of course, the case and has been for a while now. Could this also be a reason why India is shying away from these proceedings?
Yes, you are very right about it. But Sana, I tell you one thing: there are certain facts which nobody can negate. What are them facts? Facts are that there was someone called Commander Kulbhushan who has been actively obviously working for RAW in Balochistan, and of course he was facilitating, financing terrorism within in Pakistan, in Karachi, in Balochistan. He has been doing it for a long time. Plus he's the same guy who roamed around everywhere with a passport with the name of Mubarak Hussain Patel, and he had 17 visits on that passport. That passport is with Pakistan as well. Pakistan showed it at ICJ hearings as well. So these are the facts which obviously India doesn't want the world to know about. But at the same time, world knows about it because Pakistan has time and again highlighted that this is why this active naval officer of India is in our hands. But I think, Sana, I just wanted to mention here that we want to give justice to Kulbhushan Jadhav, but it is Indian government that does not want that justice to be delivered to him.
Even we've heard the statement with, of course, from the Chief Justice saying that we're trying to treat him as a human being, and this is what we want, and perhaps the same courtesy is not being extended by India. And Imran, my last question to you, since we're almost out of time, is do you think that in this case, legally, Pakistan is doing all it can to present its case in the ICJ?
Absolutely.
If that may be the case.
Absolutely, we've enacted a statute called the International Court of Justice Review and Reconsideration Act, which specifically allows any foreign national that has been convicted by a military court to file a petition before the High Court, arguing if any prejudice has been caused due to denial of consular access. And this act was specifically enacted to implement the International Court of Justice. In fact, these proceedings that are currently ongoing in the Islamabad High Court were initiated by the Ministry of Law and Justice itself, because government of India had failed to file a petition within the limitation that had been prescribed by the law. So the government of Pakistan wanted to go to court itself to get a review and reconsideration of the conviction to ensure that it was in compliance with the judgment. So the government of Pakistan has done absolutely all it can and is doing all it can to comply with that judgment.
All right. Thank you very much, Nimra Arshad, for being with us in the debate. It was a pleasure having you. And of course, since all of our stories that we've talked about today point towards the fact that Pakistan, again, is a responsible, strong and committed nation. It's always spoken against human rights violations. It has talked about what it means in terms of its interests. It protected its own interests and its territory and sovereignty, and is going to continue to do the same in terms of following international laws and being just and responsible in whatever matter it has to deal with. This needs to be clear to everybody. Thank you so much for joining the debate. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you on Monday at 7 p.m.